Bitcoin is close to becoming worthless.
Let's go. Now, what's the Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's like rat poison.
Yeah. Oh,
The greatest scam in history.
let's get it.
Bitcoin will go to fucking zero.
Yeah.
Alright, you ungovernable misfits. I'm your host, Max. Everybody knows that Bitcoin is useless, worthless, and doomed to fail. But what if everyone's wrong? What if it's the system that is doomed to fail? Join me as I speak to some of the brightest people in the space and slither to the deepest, darkest depths of the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Today, I speak to Bitcoin Q+A for the third time. In episode 35, we talked about wallets. In episode 38, we discussed nodes. And today, episode 41, we talk about Lightning. If you're listening to this now and you haven't already listened to our discussion on wallets or our discussion on nodes, I suggest you go back and have a listen. I always enjoy speaking to Bitcoin Q+A, and he has some of the best resources in the space. If you haven't already gone to his website, check it out now. The links are available in the show notes. Enjoy. Bitcoin Q+A, welcome back to the show. This is a regular thing now. What are we going to be covering today?
Good evening, yeah. I think we've got Lightning on the cards, haven't we, for episode number 3?
Exciting. All right, so Lightning. What is it? You're talking to somebody who doesn't own any Bitcoin yet, and they've heard the term, they've heard it talked about. What is it?
Okay, so in simple terms, it's a scaling solution that is built on top of the Bitcoin network. It leverages all of the security principles that the Bitcoin network implements, but kind of circumvents some of the limitations. So I think it's probably a good idea, before I get into sort of how the network works, the Lightning network works, should I say, it's probably a good idea to have a quick recap on sort of the basics of Bitcoin. And I know we touched on it in the previous episode with the node conversation that we did, but I think it's quite apt that we sort of have a bit of a recap and just highlight some of the, why do we need Lightning before we get into the technicals of what it is and how it works. So obviously, one of the beautiful things about the Bitcoin network is its finality, and it's completely transparent. So if you send me 1 million sats, then everybody else on the network knows that your address sent my address 1 million sats. And that's one of the sort of core principles of the Bitcoin network, is that everything's auditable. So we know that nobody's cheating, and everybody's held accountable, and then we know that everybody participating is playing by the same rules. Obviously, if we expand that worldwide, that is, although it's a very good thing in terms of finality and, censorship resistance and making sure that nobody's cheating, it's also not very scalable. I think the Bitcoin network has on average, I think there's about 7 transactions per second, something like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm sure that fluctuates based on network conditions, but I think that's the average. Obviously, if we're talking very long term here and global adoption, that just isn't going to cut it really. So the fallout from that, I guess, is that these blocks on the network mined every 10 minutes. So if you're sending your transaction to me and you don't pay a high enough fee to get your transaction into the next block, then you basically join the queue. Mm-hmm. And your fee is then compared by the miners to see how you stack up. And it's basically like a free market. The people that pay the highest fees get to the front of the queue, and the people that pay the lowest fees go to the back of the queue. So probably another quick thing we're touching on around sort of these blocks that are mined on the Bitcoin network, on average, take place every 10 minutes. So, if you're sending, let's say, $1 million worth of Bitcoin to buy a house, you're probably not going to mind waiting 10 20, even an hour for that to be considered final. But if you're, say, I'll use the cliche example. If you're in Starbucks buying a coffee, you're probably not going to want to stand there for 10 minutes waiting for a block to be mined before the cashier lets you disappear. So yeah, you can go and drink your latte now. Your transaction's confirmed. So obviously we need a solution to deal with the smaller payments that are required to be cleared faster. Enter the Lightning Network, which is a solution built on top of this to sort of solve some of those problems, but anchor in all of the good bits about Bitcoin. So, you can't cheat the Bitcoin network, and you require the Bitcoin network to have to make a Lightning payment.
We kind of touched on our last episode, which will now be live when people are listening to this one, which was on nodes. We were touching on the alternative to the Lightning Network, which would be bigger blocks, which for many, many reasons just doesn't make sense. And obviously, if you're not going to do that, then you have to have an alternative. And that's where the Lightning Network comes in, is that Bitcoin is fantastic for the bigger payments and it's fine now, but the fees, like you're saying, basically it's a free market, and when the network gets congested, those fees will rise. And then if you're going to buy a cup of coffee, like you just said, you're going to spend £2-3 on a coffee, and then the transaction fee is £30 or £40. You're not going to want to use that payment system. You're not going to want to use Bitcoin. So you need to have an alternative. And from what I understand, you're saying Lightning is that.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, obviously Bitcoin base layer, so to speak, fees do fluctuate. They have been higher than normal in recent months. But yeah, like I say, it's a free market. They fluctuate up and down. Yeah, I'm probably going to go out on a limb here and say that most of the time, for most types of payments, they are still at a very acceptable rate. But I think everybody's generally of the outlook that over the longer term, fees are going to start to rise because miners are going to want to be compensated as the block subsidy reduces. I think fees there'll be more competition for block space, and fees will naturally rise, which I don't think is a bad thing, because ultimately we need to incentivize the miners to continue to secure the network and process these transactions. So I think if I was a betting man, I'd say over the longer period, people are going to naturally gravitate towards using the base chain less frequently. And it's going to, the sort of base limit of what people are willing to spend on the base layer is going to slowly creep up. And then obviously those smaller payments, the coffees and the things of the world, are going to naturally gravitate to the off-chain solutions like Lightning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And so how does it work? Obviously, what you're saying really is that this is something that works the same as Bitcoin, that you can send payments without anyone being in the middle, and you can, or being able to censor those transactions, and you can know that you have final settlement when you actually receive the funds. So are there any trade-offs here, or like, how does this work? What's the difference?
Yeah, I'll probably come to the trade-offs a bit later once we've sort of given the outline of how it works.
Okay.
So Lightning is essentially a network of payment channels. So what is a payment channel? A payment channel is basically a line of communication between two parties. So let's say me and you, Max, we sort of pay each other quite regularly. So let's say you worked in a newsagent and I'm quite often coming to buy a newspaper from yourself. I know I'm going to be spending regular small amounts of cash to you. So I would think, well, if I'm going to do this on the Bitcoin base layer, it's going to start costing me, quite a sizable amount in fees for a relatively inexpensive item like a newspaper, which is probably less than £1. So I think, okay, I'm going to set up a Lightning payment channel to you. So what that looks like in simple terms is I would make an on-chain transaction known as a funding transaction, where I basically sort of front you some Bitcoin. So let's say I'm going to put £50 worth of Bitcoin into this multi-signature wallet. It's still my Bitcoin. I'm still fully in control of it. but it goes into a multi-signature address where you hold one of the keys and I hold the other key. To spend from this multi-signature wallet, it needs two signatures. So I suppose you're probably thinking now, well, all right, well, you just put 50 quid in this payment channel. Well, I could just run away with this. So to combat that, obviously, because this £50 worth of Bitcoin is rightfully mine, every time I sort of go to I'll rewind a sec. When we do the opening transaction, both you and I would sign, but not broadcast, a Bitcoin transaction to say, this £50 is rightfully mine, and none of it is rightfully Max's. We both sign it and pass it across to each other. We wouldn't broadcast it because that would close the channel. So we've got this open channel now between me and you. I own all of the funds that are in it and you own none of it. So the next time I come and buy anything from your shop, I can just go onto Lightning and send you however much it is, 10p, 50p, a pound. And that transaction does not get broadcast to the Bitcoin network. So we're not paying those on-chain fees. We're not having to wait 10 minutes for a confirmation on the network. So under the hood, when I come in and buy my newspaper from you, what does that look like? So what we do basically is I take the newspaper from you, send you a Lightning transaction for £1. So essentially what we're doing there is we're creating another signed but not broadcasted Bitcoin transaction where I've now got £49 and you've got £1. We both sign it and pass it to each other to say, yep, we agree that's the current state of our channel. And then this could go on any number of times. I could come in and pay you and none of it's happening on the Bitcoin network. So again, we're saving on those fees. It's instant or near instant. We're talking, 5 to 10 seconds for this transaction.
It's like a tally, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like our own ledger of I owe you this much, and you owe me this much,
and presumably this works both ways. So you could come in and buy a paper off me every day, and 7 days in, you've slid across £7 across to me if it's a pound of paper. But then we see each other at the pub and you say, oh, I'll buy you a drink. So that's whatever it is, £3.50. And then that gets slid back the other way and it sort of rebalances itself. And this can presumably just happen as long as we want it to, until we decide that we want to close that channel, and only then is that broadcast, and therefore the fees are basically zero.
Yeah, so to up to the value of whatever we open or I open the channel with, which is £50 in the example, me and you can exchange transactions for as long as the Bitcoin and the Lightning Network are running. So we could keep this channel open for 10 years if we wanted to. A couple of the limitations, obviously we've got the £50 cap because that's all that we put into the channel in the first place, which again, if I'm only buying newspapers, is not a problem. Another limitation is if I was to open the channel to you, and there's only me, in its initial state, there's only me that can send money to you. If you think of it like beads on an abacus, all of the beads are on my side. So you've got plenty of room to receive, but you've got nothing to spend. Right. So that's one of the sort of pitfalls that when people are getting started with the Lightning Network is they sort of they get their node running, they open a channel to somebody, and then they try and get somebody to send them some. They try and get somebody to send them some sats. And they've got no what's known as inbound liquidity. So you need. Again, so go on.
Sorry. So what you're saying is you need the same amount of inbound liquidity as you have going out. So if I wanted to receive, say, £1 from you, I have to have £1 to be able to go out as well, so that it's balanced.
Yeah, so there's two ways you can gain inbound liquidity or be able to receive funds. Number one is, I'll go back to our example. I've opened the channel to you for £50. If I wanted to have inbound liquidity for you to spend for me, I'd have to spend some money away from my side of the abacus. So I'd have to sort of spend some sat. So that's the simplest way to do it. But obviously, it's not desirable if you're going to end up just spending money for the sake of it, just to gain some inbound liquidity. And the easiest way to do it is for you to open a channel back to me. That's what's known as a sort of a reciprocal channel. But obviously, not everybody's going to be willing to do that. And you may not have any friends that run Lightning nodes, or you may just not be able to find anybody that's willing to put up the capital to say, yeah, I'm going to open a channel back to you. Because, there is, although there's no security or very minimal security risks in doing so, you've got the thought process of actually having to, boot up their node or their Lightning wallet and open that channel. And they've also got to pay some on-chain fees. So whilst we were talking earlier about Lightning nodes saving on fees, which they do in the long run, if fees are, say, at, let's say, peak bull run 2017 levels, it's still going to cost you, if you want this channel opened in a relatively decent amount of time, it may cost you £4 or £5. So obviously there's that to consider, but generally speaking, fees are much lower than that on chain. But it is something to consider when trying to get some inbound liquidity. The other option as well, you can actually purchase some inbound liquidity. So there are companies out there where you can go onto their website and say, here's my Lightning credentials. I'm going to send you this much on-chain Bitcoin. I want you to open a channel to me for the same value. Well, it will be slightly less than the actual value that you send them, because obviously they'll take a cut of that because that's their business model. But that is another option as well to gain inbound liquidity.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess the cost is in terms of just you have to effectively lock up funds or have them sat on your node out of cold storage, or you have to use a company that does that for you, and therefore you're not fully self-sovereign because you are using another company. So do you have to, say, open a channel for every single person that you'd ever want to pay? Or say I had a channel open with you because you're buying papers from me and I occasionally buy you a drink. What if then you had a channel open with somebody else, Rodolfo Novak, because we just mentioned him before we started the conversation? Like, what if then you had a channel open with him and I want to pay him for a cold card? Can that work, or do I have to have a channel open with every person?
No, so this is where the Lightning Network sort of really shines. Obviously, it would be completely bonkers to have to open a channel to everybody that you wanted to pay via Lightning, because you've still got to open that channel. You've got to pay on-chain fees. So it would completely defeat the object. You'd just be opening channels for the sake of it for a single payment, and you'd end up paying more fees than you would have done if you'd have just done the on-chain transaction. So the beauty of the Lightning Network is that these channels can be linked together. So yeah, I'll sort of expand on that example that you gave earlier. Obviously, me and you, we've got that channel open, and you've got a channel open with Rodolfo from CoinKite. So let's say I want to buy a cold card from Rodolfo, but I don't have a channel open with him. I've got one to you, and you've got one to him. So what I can do is, again, everything I'm about to go to is completely obfuscated away from the user. You'll never see all of this. This just sort of happens under the hood for you. But effectively, what my Lightning implementation will do will give you a little tap on the shoulder and say, I need to get this many sats over to Novak, to Rodolfo.
To Novak. Boy, Novak, we're sending you some sats.
And so I give you a tap on the shoulder and say, I know you've got a channel open with Rodolfo. Can you send in these funds for me? So I can sort of route through you to get my funds over to Rodolfo to buy my cold card. Now, all of this is done in a completely secure and cryptographical way, so that, because the obvious thought process there is that I could give the funds to you, and then you could just do a runner. I don't get my cold card, and I'm out of pocket. So all of this is built in a way that you don't get paid until I get proof that you have paid Rodolfo. So it's all
Okay.
the system is built so that nobody can cheat. And again, we're just reverting back to the basic, or keeping it as basic as they can, is that all that's happening is when we're doing these communications is that we are passing updated state channels. So if I've got £50 on my channel, I pass 40 of it over to you to buy a cold card, pretty cheap cold card.
Yeah,
and then
half a cold card.
Yeah, and then you would pass the exact same value over to Rodolfo, and then I get my cold card, and then we all update to say, yeah, this is the new state
Right.
the state of our channels. You are the net the same, aren't you? Because you've received the same amount that you have passed on to Rodolfo. I'm down £40, and Rodolfo's up £40.
All I'm doing is I'm acting as a middleman,
Exactly.
effectively, but I don't even know that I am. I'm just one link in a chain that helps connect the two of you. So how much can this spread out? Because obviously, that's 3 people, and setting up the channel, it's not really a pain, but and I'm sure it will get easier. But like you said, you don't want to set one up for every single person. What happens if, say it's me and I've got no mates, and so like my only friend is Bitcoin Q&A, and I say Bitcoin Q&A, like I want to use Lightning, but no one wants to open a channel with me, no one wants to be my friend. Could you somehow get this payment to whoever? If you had 1,000 Lightning channels open with different people, can that go to any one of yours and any one of those 1,000 people's? Does it keep spreading like that? Do you see what I'm asking?
So the beauty of this, the beauty of the Lightning Network is that basically the more people there are participating and opening channels, think of it like a mesh network. I'm sure you've probably seen, like a spider type diagram with sort of all of these circles and all these lines spiking off them. Well, that's kind of what the sort of visual of the Lightning Network looks like. So the more people that we've got running nodes and opening channels basically gives everybody on the network more optionality and more possible paths to reach their recipient, if you like. So I think there is a couple of, a concern from some Lightning critics that say that there's people on the network that have got loads and loads of Lightning nodes, and because they're sort of quite central, if you like, in the network, because they're really well connected, and they've got loads of channels, and because they're well connected, more and more people want to connect to them, because that, if you connect to a well connected node, you in theory have got a higher chance of getting your routed payments connected. So there is a slight concern from some people that say, well, this is kind of like a bit like the banks, if you like, in real life, where they're kind of like sucking up all of the world's wealth, if you like. And obviously, if a lot of payments are being routed through a few parties, there are some very some minor sort of risk in terms of, if they turn into bad actors, they could start censoring payments, or they could start acting in bad faith, basically. I mean, the chances of that happening are slim, because of the way that these payments are routed through onion layers, if you like. They can't actually sort of steal any funds or anything like that. It would be more like a denial of service attack, where they would just stop you getting your payment to me, rather than, they wouldn't be able to sort of steal those funds sort of halfway across the route, if you like.
So in that sort of unlikely scenario, let's say that there was a bad actor and they set up a load of Lightning channels and they had a lot of connections, and that payments were being routed through them and they were trying to stop them. Could people then choose not to route through them, and basically people could just close their channels and go elsewhere? Because the way I see it is like, the old like 6 degrees of separation thing. It's like it doesn't actually take that many connections to actually be connected to everybody. So presumably, if this became used by more people, actually you don't need to have that many people running these nodes who are good actors to connect everyone.
Yeah, exactly. The more people, general users like me and you that are running Lightning nodes, the more if these big players were to sort of turn into adversaries, there's so many more options for my node to look to get a different path around them to your node. So I think obviously we wouldn't know from a user level. All that you'd see if they were sort of acting up would be that your payment would fail. And if you were to restart it again, the likelihood is that your Lightning node would look for a different path and it would probably succeed the second time. So yeah, it's just a case of the more people using this, the stronger it gets.
Okay. So just to recap then, Lightning is here because Bitcoin is not currently scalable to look after the payments of the entire world and for it to be fast enough at this point in time. The cost of these payments probably will, and it's probably best for the network that those fees go up, and that it's fine for those fees to go up. If you're doing large transactions, you're going to be okay with that and you're fine with it taking a little bit longer. But if you are buying a coffee or doing smaller payments, you do want something faster. So that's where the Lightning Network comes in. And then the trade-offs are that you do have to have these channels open, but basically what you're saying is that the more people who use it, the more or the less channels you effectively need to have, because your payments just find a route and they just see that you know someone who knows someone, and that gets it there. And it might only be 2 hops, or it might be 6, or it might be 10, but it's going to find, just without you doing anything, the most efficient and fastest way to get there. You were saying about it being onion routed or a similar kind of idea, so that I assume that people don't necessarily know where the hop prior to the hop that they've had is coming from, so they can't. It is probably better for privacy as well. Is there anything I've missed, or are we sort of like up to date there?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is, let's say you're paying me and there are the route that your node's found has got 6 hops. Hop number 3 in that route would only know about hop number 2 and hop number 4. They wouldn't know anything else other than their sort of who they're receiving from and who they're sending to. So they wouldn't even know if they were the last person, the second person, or the 4th person in that route. Like I say, all they would know is that they've received and they need to send it on for them to get paid. So yeah, probably a good point to add there is that all of those hops in between me and you to route those sats across the network can, if they want to, say, I'm only going to route this payment if you give me 1 sat. So there are, the Lightning Network is not completely free. We've paid our on-chain fees to open the channel, and if you want to send me 50,000 sats, that might cost you 1 sat in fees. So, at current Bitcoin prices, we're talking less than a penny. So comparatively to on-chain fees, it's massively reduced. And again, it is like an open, a free market. Again, if somebody's set their routing fees on the Lightning Network to say everything's going to cost £1 to go through my node, then basically everybody's just going to route around them and they won't get any fees whatsoever. So it's quite well structured in the fact that, much like the Bitcoin network, there's a competitive fee market, and if you're charging too much, people are just going to route around you. And I think, again, the more people that join the network, the more fierce the competition is going to be to keep fees low, to sort of gain 1 or 2 sats here or there. If you're routing a lot of payments, might soon start to add up. But I would say that to anybody listening, please don't spin up a Lightning node and thinking that you're going to make some sizable income from it. I think even the biggest and well-connected nodes that have got millions of pounds worth of sats locked up in the Lightning network are not earning a great deal in fees. We're talking probably a couple of $1,000 a month, if that. But when you consider the trade-offs of what they're having to go through, in terms of managing those channels and having all of these funds effectively on a hot wallet that's connected to the internet, is quite risky, I suppose, at the end of the day. And any keys that are connected to the internet do have an increased risk, which again, we covered this off in the wallets episode that we did.
Okay, so basically, really, it just makes payments faster and cheaper, and the people who route those payments or have these channels earn a small amount, but it's so small, and from the way you've said it there, it should sort of find its equilibrium. It should be a very, very low fee because it's a free market, and like you said, if somebody's charging fees that are too high, someone else is going to undercut them, and that's just going to keep happening until we find what the right fees are. And I think that's probably going to be quite low. So it is Bitcoin. You're sending sats. You're just doing it in a different way. Does anyone control this, or does it have some sort of issue where someone controls it or can censor it, or that it's different to Bitcoin in that way?
No. In the short answer, obviously the opening and closing transactions get mined into a block, so on the base layer. So again, those have to adhere to all of the rules that the general Bitcoin network abides by. There's no cheat in that, unfortunately. Once you're sort of off chain and you've got your sat on Lightning, so to speak, again, the network is structured in such a way that when you're routing these payments, whether you're sending, receiving, or you are one of the hops, it's very, very difficult for the general layman to cheat the network and steal funds, because everything's backed in a similar way that Bitcoin is in terms of private keys and things like that. Everything's backed by cryptography. And I'm not even going to try and explain sort of how the technicals work, but yeah, just rest assured that those protocols are built so that nobody can cheat them.
Okay, well, that sounds pretty interesting, and it answers. I mean, I'm sure you've had this before, like when you're explaining all of this stuff, and we mentioned that 7 transactions per second, and you have like the standard answer where people are like, oh well, Bitcoin's going to fail because you can't buy your cup of coffee, and you have all those kind of just irritating questions, but at the end of the day they are kind of valid, because there's no question that Bitcoin as a money is better than what we currently have. There is just no question, and anyone who argues that, in my opinion, is just flat out wrong. But we do need to be able to use it as a payment system as well. And this, from what I understand, could be one of, if not the answer to that issue. And that if this is set up properly and it's adopted by more people, there's no reason that you can't just use Bitcoin for everyday payments and tiny payments and micro payments and all these ideas that are floating around. Is there any sort of drawback to it? Is there any issue with it where people are concerned, or is it just that this hasn't been adopted yet?
Yeah. So obviously, talking about the current state of the network, I mean, much like Bitcoin, it's changing on a monthly basis. But currently, some of the drawbacks, you've got, obviously we talked about the network's built, all of these payment channels are kind of linked together. So you've got to sort of manage the balances within those payment channels. So going back to our very first example, if I put £50 in a channel to you, and I bought 50 papers off you, I can't send you any more money in that channel. So I either need to open a new channel, or you need to send me some money. But if it's your shop and you don't want anything from me, that's never going to happen. So there are a couple of tools known as loop in and loop out, which these come under the what's known as, and it's always perplexed me, this term that they give it, but a submarine swap, where basically you can trustlessly change on-chain Bitcoin for off-chain Lightning, which is still Bitcoin, but it's Lightning within a channel. So I would go to a loop provider and say, I'm going to give you 100,000 sats. I want you to take your fee and then put 950,000 sats into that channel that I've just specified, so that I can continue to go and buy my paper from Max every morning. which works, but obviously currently with the way the tools are built, it's not for the average user. It's extra friction. You know, when people are used to just going and tapping their phone onto a card reader and, you know, they just spend their monthly wages like that. It's almost frictionless. Going from that to having to manage these channels, I think we're a long way off yet from this being ready for the mainstream. Whether that's the reason that we haven't seen as much adoption of it than we perhaps could have is potential. But again, you know, I think we've mentioned it in all three, or I've mentioned it in all three pods. Again, it's about trade-offs. I think there are wallets and apps that are working to, you know, take all of this sort of channel management view away from the user, which I think is probably a good thing. But I think until we get to that stage where somebody's just got a wallet that has either just a Lightning balance and it looks after itself, or it's got just got a single balance. And then if I go to buy a paper off you, it knows that the best thing to do is to spend via Lightning. Or if I go to buy a car from your friend for £50,000, it knows that on-chain is the best and it will just choose for you. But I think we're quite some way away from that yet. Again, it's bounded around a lot on Twitter, but I think we're still very, very early. And it's particularly in terms of the Lightning Network, we're super early.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we're early. And I think it kind of, a lot of it comes down to this idea of there's such a small percentage of people who are interested in Bitcoin and actually understand Bitcoin to some level where they're comfortable with it and see it as like, okay, this is probably going to be the future of money. So those people who do understand it don't really spend it that often. You know, like we said before, maybe it'd be for stickers or, you know, from people who are within our network and people that we know and we want to support the projects that they're doing, but they're not really spending it. And the people who aren't involved in Bitcoin and don't really see why it's important aren't probably going to use this until, like you said, it is just an app that does the best thing for the user without them having to think at all. And yeah, that probably is a while away. But what's exciting is that this stuff is possible. And just the fact that it's possible and it's doable now, even with that friction, means that not too long from now, especially the way that things are developing, all of this stuff is possible. And when we really think what that means, it means that we can have a payment network that can, well, it can service everyone on the planet potentially. And that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think just to add a bit of context to that, while you've just been talking through that last piece, I've just pulled up mempool.space, which again I think we covered it off in our nodes episode. But basically, what that is a quick, a visualization of the current mempool, which is like all of the transactions that are queued up. To get right now, it's Friday night on the 8 o'clock Friday night on the 7th of August. To get your transaction mined into the next block on chain, you're looking at $3.70. So, you know, if that was to continue those sort of levels of fees and you needed an instant transaction for something that costs $10, the likelihood of you wanting to do that on chain and paying a 30% fee, well, nearly a 40% fee at nearly $4, you're not going to want to do it, are you? You're going to look for alternatives. Yeah. So I think there's two ways that this Lightning thing gets adopted. It's either through UX, which we just covered, or it's forced in through fees, where people just think, well, I know this Lightning UX might not be the end product, but there's no way I'm paying $3.50 for a $10 transaction for it to be mined into the next block when I can do it on Lightning for 5 sats. So I think if since the halving, obviously fees have slowly been trending up, which isn't a surprise to me and probably to most people. I think if they do continue to trend up, I think Lightning adoption probably will see some more focus.
Yeah, because it's a case of, like, certainly for me, I very rarely spend my Bitcoin. And if I do, it's normally in larger amounts. So then I'd be like, well, you know, if I'm sending it and it's a couple of dollars, is it really the end of the world? And I'm used to it and I don't have to mess around and set up channels and all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of just like an ease of use. But yeah, if I was using it more or I was sending a transaction, I was thinking, actually, I don't want to be spending that. It's going to force me more to use Lightning. And maybe that's what it takes for more people to use it, is that it's like, oh, the fees have gone up and I'm not prepared to spend that. Right, I need to actually spend some time and learn how to use that.
Yeah, definitely. Just one thing I'll probably add that we didn't cover off earlier around the sort of core principles of how it works, the Lightning Network. Obviously, I mentioned that we pass, whenever one of us sends some Lightning funds back and forth, we pass across these signed but not broadcasted transactions that update the current who's rightful amount of sats. If you were to try and cheat me, so let's say we agree on the current state of the channel, but you've got an old state that sort of gives you, let's say we go out to dinner and I paid for it, and then you say, oh, I'll send it you back over Lightning. You send me $10 back over Lightning, but you grab an old state where you still had that $10, and then you close that channel and broadcast that to the network. If my node catches you doing that, I have the ability to sort of broadcast the updated, the rightful state of our channel. So basically catch you out, say, I know you're trying to cheat me. Here's my proof. I've got an updated version of our channel. You get basically what's called, I think it's something along the lines of a penalty transaction, where basically I can steal all of the funds. Well, I steal all of the funds in our channel. So if you still had 100,000 sats that were rightfully yours in that channel, because you tried to cheat me, and I could prove that you were trying to cheat me because of the way that the network is structured and the way that these channel states are identified, I could then say, well, sorry, Matt, you just tried to cheat me. I'm going to take all these funds. And the network would recognize that and confirm my transaction over yours. There is a time window that I have to do this. So I have to sort of see you doing it, which I suppose is one of the drawbacks. But if I am, sorry, go on.
Is there not like something like Watchtowers that does this and it manages it for you? Am I right in saying? I'm sure I've heard.
Yeah, that's right. But at the moment, to my knowledge, they're not widely used. And I'm pretty sure that you have to pay a fee for that as well. But to my knowledge, they haven't been widely implemented. But that is a fix for that, where I could sort of pay a very small fee to, let's say, Lightning Labs, who run a Watchtower service. I could pay them a very small fee to say, I've got this channel with Max. I don't trust him. You what? Well, what's the saying? Don't trust, verify. Yeah. So I could say to them, I don't trust him. Can you watch our channel and let me know if he tries to close the channel in a non-collaborative way without notifying me? And yeah, I'm sure there's probably a more technical way to describe how they work, but that's the general gist of it. And they'll sort of notify me and potentially know the current state of the channel, cross-reference that with what you're trying to broadcast and go, hang on a minute, Max is trying to cheat here. They'll notify me, or they'll even broadcast the justice transaction where I've got the rightful state of the channel, and then kind of screw you out of your sats basically because you were trying to screw me. So like you say, it's quite tough to cheat the Lightning Network, much like it is the Bitcoin network. So
and there's a cost to trying.
There is, yeah. There's a penalty or potential penalty, yeah, if you're trying to screw somebody over.
I got really excited about Lightning a couple of years ago, like fairly early on when I was getting involved with Bitcoin, and like I was obsessively watching all the Andreas Antonopoulos videos and him talking about micropayments and streaming money and all this stuff. And I remember just sitting up all night just watching this stuff and being like, oh my God, this is crazy. Because your mind goes to the sort of the extremities of what this technology could do and what could actually happen if this is usable for most people. And the ideas that have been talked about and the things that could potentially be possible are absolutely amazing. it just seems like all the building blocks are there. Everything is there. We're just now waiting for it to be built. And from what you've explained there, it seems that there's very little downside. It seems that managed correctly, this is a system that can work for most people. It just seems that maybe it's a little bit too difficult at the moment, and for most people anyway, and that, give it a few years. Is it something that you see could do things like micropayments, and you could stream money, and you could have like paywalls on websites, and you could do all this kind of stuff? Or do you think there's limitations on that?
Yeah, I think there's two really good use cases that are kind of slowly coming into fruition at the moment. Number one being gaming. So obviously the beauty of the Lightning Network, that these near instant transactions that can be of a very, very small value because of the almost lack of any fees whatsoever across the network, enable, let's say me and you were playing a Call of Duty type game. We could have our Lightning wallets connected to this game that links in via a plugin. And every time I beat you in a team deathmatch, your wallet pays me 100 sats. Now, obviously, that just wouldn't be possible on the base chain because it would cost you more than that in fees alone. So, if me and you were playing Call of Duty for 6 hours on a Saturday, we might sort of pass back and forth, a couple of thousand sats, as like a little wager, and that would happen instantaneously, and we'd pay almost no fees whatsoever to achieve that. So I think that's one use case that might come to the forefront. The other one is kind of streaming services. Now, I personally haven't seen much of this at the moment. Obviously, I'd imagine it's quite technical to implement, but you could have essentially a Netflix style service where, again, if you hooked your Lightning wallet up to it, rather than paying Netflix £10 a month, you could just pay a couple of sats for every 10 minutes that you watch of Game of Thrones. So it's kind of a pay per play type thing. And I suppose they're the two main ones that sort of jump into my mind as to some of the power of Lightning, aside from the obvious of, small payments, buying a coffee that's instant, and, cheap fees. I think we do start to see a lot more use cases like that start to pop up as the base chain fees grow and the Lightning Network itself matures and the UX improves. I think we're probably a couple of years away from some of the stuff that I've just mentioned, but you can see the sort of green shoots starting to show at the moment. But in terms of actual need for the Lightning Network, I think on-chain for most payments stays very manageable and achievable for a good number of years to come, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, but it's good to have this as not a backup, but just to know that it's being developed in the background, because we're aware that the fee pressure is going to build and that these fees are going to go up, and the fact that it's set up in such a way that these different use cases can work. There's no reason you can't build them. It's just a case of building them, and that's pretty amazing. Like the things you've mentioned, like a Netflix kind of idea. You're saying, you watch 10 minutes, you pay for 10 minutes. There's so many different things like that where it breaks down these barriers of having to have things in batches, where it can be so much more fluid. Like money it can be so much of a better and sharper tool than it currently is, because you can't make a payment for half a penny. You can't do that. It's just not possible. Or you can't stream money for when you're actually paying for a service online. It's just something that's literally not possible with any other system, and that can actually be possible with this. And that has serious value.
Yeah, definitely. I think we probably start to see even new businesses and business models that we probably can't even think of at the moment start to pop up because of what these instant and near fee-free payments start to enable. So I'm sure if we were to have this conversation again in another 5 to 10 years, there's probably whole new business models, much like most business cycles. You start to see things like Uber's probably a good example. Nobody would have even thought that they'd be able to just call an Uber on their phone 10 years ago, call a taxi on their phone or anything like that. So I think it's probably going to open up various new business models again that we can't even imagine at the moment.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. It really is. Obviously a lot of this stuff is a long way away, but for people who now are listening to this and maybe they already have some Bitcoin and they think, this sounds cool, I want to actually give it a go. What services are available now where people can dive in and have a play? Because, that really does seem to be the best way to learn with this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So much like the base layer, there's two ways you can interact with Lightning. There's custodial and non-custodial. So quick recap, I know we've covered it with wallets, our wallets pod. Non-custodial is where you're sort of in control of the private keys and you're sort of interacting with your own Lightning node. And custodial is obviously the opposite of that. So some of the custodial services where you're using somebody else's Lightning node, I think Blue Wallet is a good example of that. This Blue Wallet actually offers both. It defaults to using their Lightning node. So if you were to send some Bitcoin on chain into your Blue Wallet, you could then use that to send some funds across Lightning. What that looks like under the hood basically would be that you're sending some sat to Blue Wallet and they're doing the Lightning bit on your behalf. So you still get the benefit of the low fees and the instant sort of transactions, but they're doing the legwork for you, so to speak. So again, that's an easy way to get started and a quick way to get started. But obviously it comes with the same trade-offs that they're doing the security side of things. And so you are putting a little bit of trust in them. Breeze is also a good option. Breeze Wallet's made a very good UX that kind of, I think they actually open a small channel to you as well when you set the wallet up. So you can actually receive funds straight away, which is a good sort of onboarding tool. How scalable that is in terms of if and when the so-called masses turn up, I'm not sure whether they'd be able to sort of scale that to millions of people. But again, currently a very good onboarding tool for most people. And my personal favorite, because I'm a turbo nerd and I've got my own Lightning node, is Zap Wallet, which I run on my Android phone. So I've got my Lightning node, which runs on my node, which again we covered off in the nodes pod. So what that is basically it runs on a framework that allows it to communicate back to my node at home. So I can send and receive Lightning payments from anywhere in the world as long as I've got my phone with me, and they are being routed essentially back to my node at home that's sat in my office. So that's probably the ultimate way to interact with the Lightning network, but certainly not necessary in terms of starting out. One final thing I probably will add is that, the nature that most people are going to interact with the Lightning network is that they're going to be doing really small, low value transactions for stuff like, at the moment it's novelty stuff, isn't it? It's stickers or feeding chickens. I don't know whether you've seen that
the
Apollo
chicken
feed.
Yeah.
That was the first Lightning transaction I ever made, funny enough, was to feed some chickens. So like I say, it's low value stuff. So the necessity that is done in a sovereign and most censorship security resistant way is obviously much less important than if you're interacting with the base chain and you're doing much larger transactions or you're putting your life savings into it. Then obviously you want to do that in a most secure way. So I personally, obviously I'm an advocate of everybody holding their own keys and running their own node, but if you're just putting £10 in to have a play around, some of the Breeze and things like that where you're using their node probably isn't a bad option just to get started and play around. You still get all the benefits of it, and it's not the end of the world if you lose 10 quid, is it?
No. And you mentioned Zap. So Zap is Jack Mallers, isn't it? And from what I understand, he's got another system that he's worked on, which is basically that you can actually pay for things with a card, and he's working with Visa or something like that. That's
Strike.
Another option. Strike, that's the one.
Yeah.
So How does that work? And like, do you see that that's something that's going to come to the UK and other countries soon?
Yeah, I think judging by the sentiment on Bitcoin Twitter, everybody was lapping it up. I think from a UX perspective, it's very, very clever. So from what I can gather, obviously I've never used it because I'm in the UK and I hate KYC, which I'll come on to in a minute. But essentially, you link it to your debit card, and you can just top it up. So I can go onto my HSBC account and I can throw £50 into my Strike wallet, which is just a mobile wallet, and that mobile wallet sort of speaks the Lightning network. So if I wanted to pay you over Lightning, you could send me a Lightning invoice. I could scan that Lightning invoice, and my Strike wallet in the background would use Jack Mallers' Lightning network, and it would convert that pound sterling. And on his end, he would pay you in Lightning. So you receive Lightning, and I have a reduction in my pound sterling balance in my Strike wallet. So you're happy because you've got Lightning. I'm happy because it's friction free for me. All I've done is just put some pounds in. It was fast, it was instant, and it was really easy and slick to use. Problem being, again, and a lot of people new to the space might not see this as an issue, this is a bit of a rabbit warren of KYC. So to sign up to Strike and many other services that make UX really, really slick and easy. Obviously, if you're interacting with Bitcoin and the legacy system, the government want to know about it. So you have to provide, I don't believe it's much information, but it's some information to Strike or to anybody that's operating a similar sort of service. So basically everything's recorded. And so in that instance where I've just sent you, say 100,000 sats, they would know, the government would know about that. If they were to subpoena Jack Mallers and say, I want to know all of these transactions on this date, they could look at that and go, okay, Bitcoin Q+A sent this Lightning node this much money. Yeah. So again, might not be a threat model for most people, but again, if you start digging into the privacy side of things and the things that governments are up to and the risks that poses and the KYC honeypots, I think it will probably worry a lot of people. So me personally, just tying it back into Strike, probably when it comes to the UK, probably not going to sign up for it because I can use the Lightning network. Might not be as slick as Strike is, but I can still use the Lightning network and pay the exact same invoice in a way that doesn't tie my personal identity to it and give away all of my personal information. I can still pay that same invoice in a lot more private way.
Yeah, the reason I think things like that are interesting, it's not something that I would be interested in for myself, and it sounds like the same with you, but it's definitely something that could onboard people. And until you're onboarded, it's difficult to actually understand why KYC isn't so good necessarily and why it's important to have privacy. And it's only for a lot of people, once you fall down that Bitcoin rabbit hole, that all this other stuff becomes clear. And then you're like, okay, this is why it's important to actually have privacy. So I kind of see it as, if it can onboard people and maybe they use that for a period of time because it's just easy and they don't have to think because they don't care, then it might then suck them into actually caring in the future. So it's kind of like a Trojan horse.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm under no illusion that nobody's going to come into this space and go, right, I'm going to buy all of my Bitcoin off BISC. I'm willing from day one to go through that headache of, setting up my BISC app. Because I'll be the first one to admit I'm the biggest non-KYC advocate, or one of the biggest non-KYC advocates out there. But it genuinely is not as easy as going on to Strike or to Cash App and using their flashy UX and giving up that personal information. It's nowhere near as easy. There is a lot more friction points buying non-KYC. It's definitely getting easier, but nobody in their right mind that's just coming into this is going to try it. And the likelihood is, if they do go direct to somewhere non-KYC and they see all of these extra touch points, it's probably going to switch them off So I think tools like Cash App and Strike do have their place, and yeah, they are great onboarding tools. And like you say, if I can get somebody to pay me a 50p Lightning invoice, and they see that happen in split seconds by using Strike, and that gets them hooked a little bit to start asking more questions, that's probably a net positive for me. And then it buys enough interest then for you to sort of hold their attention long enough to say, okay, that was good, but here's the trade-offs, and here's what you can do to circumvent that, or to, probably a bad way to describe it, but to avoid giving up all of this personal information that's just to do exactly the same end result.
Is that wow factor when it's fast, and it's the ease, and that is how you onboard people. And that's why with CoinFloor, my sponsors, with anyone who's new, I don't try and say, oh, go on to Bisc and download that and then write down your 24 words and blah blah blah. I just don't do it, because most people will just get scared off. So I say, go to CoinFloor. I know that in an ideal world, you don't actually have the KYC stuff, and once you've fallen down the rabbit hole, that's the way that most people go. But to onboard them, I know that I can just say, right, CoinFloor UK, you go on there, you buy a certain amount a week, and they get comfortable with this stuff. And with things like Strike, they can see how slick this stuff can be, and then they can say, okay, right, well, I've bought some, I'm actually getting interested in this stuff. Can you tell me how to go KYC? And then they can do it. But they have to actually care in the first place, because if they don't care about it, and most people don't until they understand why it's so important, then they're not going to bother messing around with hodl or Bisc, or going and doing a cash transaction with the risks that go with that, or mining, or any of the other ways to get KYC free Bitcoin. It's just too much effort for most people, sadly.
Definitely. I mean, we hear about data leaks almost on a weekly basis now, and it's almost kind of just nobody pays any attention, do they? Or,
no.
Certainly nobody outside of the Bitcoin echo chamber pays any attention whatsoever. Nobody cares. I suppose it's just a sign of daily life, really, and the where we're at, sadly. So I think, like you say, you've got to get that buy-in first, and then slowly start to infiltrate them with the trade-offs.
Yeah, and Bitcoin fixes these
it does.
These data
it
leaks.
Does. Yeah. Well, unless you're giving away all your information to buy it in the first place.
For sure. But that's what has been good talking to you about. Let's be realistic, is that 99% of people who get involved in Bitcoin are going to go to a KYC exchange. I did. I'm not going to mention the exchange that I went to, but I straight away went to an exchange, put in all my KYC information, didn't care, didn't even think about it. And then, 6 months later, a year later, I was like, oh, I wish I hadn't have done that. But I'd have never done it otherwise. And what's good is that we're now talking about, okay, how do you have a wallet, and how do you control your own keys? Step one, take it off the exchange. Right, now one step better, how do you run a node, and how do you connect that to your wallet so that you're not leaking data? Okay, great. And now we've had this conversation about Lightning, which again actually can help prevent surveillance if it's used in the right way. And you're talking about the way that can work. And I think maybe the next conversation needs to be on CoinJoin, and how to actually, maybe you've leaked your information, or maybe you've actually given your KYC information, and now you've fallen down the rabbit hole, and you think, okay, well, how can I change this? What can I do? And there are tools available to actually to change that. So nothing's perfect, but there are the tools to go back and sort of almost rewrite history.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I'm obviously a massive advocate of CoinJoin, and again, much like the Lightning side of things, it's very much a hobbyist type thing at the moment. We are not going to get newbies coming in, buying on Coinbase and then going, right, I need to CoinJoin my sats. What am I going to do now? Because they're not at that level yet. Again, the UX is improving massively. And I'll probably just leave it at that because I know we're going to have another conversation, I think, and we'll probably get into the weeds of it all there.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to speak to you about CoinJoin. I think there's definitely a whole show in that, and it's something that's really important. It's something that people won't realize at first, but the further you go down the rabbit hole, the more you realize how important privacy is. And it's great that we have these tools available. I mean, a couple of days ago, I interviewed Chris Belcher, and he's working on some pretty amazing stuff that's going to be coming out with CoinSwap, and that's got me really excited. And outside of that, we've got Join Market and Samurai and all this. I know you're a massive Samurai fan, and I love
Huge.
their wallet as well.
Yeah.
So there's loads of tools out there, and that I think should definitely be our next conversation. And hopefully people will find it interesting and it will help them.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's again a good natural progression from the first 3 pods that we've done. So I think it'll complement me quite well.
Brilliant. All right. And so, obviously this was a lightning show. We sort of went a bit more onto privacy towards the end, but was there anything that we've missed with lightning, or do you think we sort of covered most things there?
I think we've covered it off. I just want to reiterate, a bit like the wallets one, just download one of these apps and just try it. It doesn't have to be for much. It can be for, a couple of quid. Just try it, see the how it all works together, and sort of witness the benefits of it. If you've already done an on-chain transaction and seen what that user experience is like, download Breeze or Blue Wallet or one of those Lightning ones and just make a Lightning transaction and just see how it works. And, you'll start to see the differences and how the two can sort of fit together. Try and make a note of the fees that you pay as well and sort of compare those to the fees that you paid on your last on-chain transaction. Yeah, much like anything, just try and dip a toe in and get yourself started.
Brilliant. All right. Well, Bitcoin Q&A, thank you as always. It's brilliant to go through this stuff, and it's definitely useful for me, and I'm sure it is for the listeners as well. So I can't wait for the next one, and it will be about a week from the release of this one, week to 10 days. So listen out for that, and I'll link all of these different wallets in the show notes for people to have a play.
Awesome. Yeah, look forward to speaking again, Max. Cheers.
All right. Speak soon.